Hello everyone, and welcome to this tutorial for Adobe Analytics API 2.0 with Python. On this video, I would try to actually showcase you how to actually use the Adobe Analytics API 2.0 module that I created. And this module is called aanalytics2. And we will see how to use that. And as I was explaining at the beginning of this series, I will explain a bit of Python time to time and a bit of Pandas. Um, Regarding that, we could see that I have opened. So Pandas, if you didn't watch my video previously, is the module that can be installed directly and used by Python, and it's very good for data manipulation. So I would recommend you to spend some time with Pandas because we will use that a lot, and most of the return elements that are done by my module is a Panda data frame. So uh, feel free to use it. Looking into that, we'll see that there is actually a getting started elements, so that you can install the library using a pipe with pip install aanalytics2. We will do that. You see here the dependencies that are there, and you see that there are several capabilities. So the reporting API that we will see right now. So we will actually try to retrieve some segments, some dimension, maybe some calculated metrics. I think we will not do everything because you will get the idea of what is possible from this module, from the example I will showcase. But in any case, if you want to do that, then you can actually do more by going to the documentation and see what is possible. And actually, I think I already have this explained, and we will go through most of the things already available and explain them. So you will get the inner understanding of how the module is being used or being built. Obviously, you can contribute to this module if you have any issue. You see that people are having issues. Some people have contributed. Thanks for Sabik for his contribution to install it. And yeah, definitely this is always welcome. Then let's get started. So first, we will need to install this module. And as I was showcasing to you beforehand on the very first video of this series, you can actually do pipe install to actually install anything. So you can install pandas like this and analytics 2 like this, and we'll install both. And they will most likely say to us that their requirement is already satisfied, and so we can actually start using it. I will also encourage you to use Jupyter to install Jupyter. You can have Jupyter directly installed if you use the Conda installation. If you didn't do that, then you need to install it. Again, pipe install Jupyter can do that. Interesting to know that you can upgrade the package, and that could be very useful, especially for my package, because it's right now the version, I think, 0.0.7. So it's a very early version, and if there is any bug fix coming, you see that I fixed something 26 days ago about infinite looping. And then you will need to upgrade that. And in order to upgrade that, you need to do pip install the package you want to have, like Analytics2. Yeah, it's good, Analytics2, and then you do upgrade, and then that will upgrade to the latest version. So if you remember, I actually started this series with the tutorial where I downloaded my configuration that I have done on the console.adobe.io. By using the Adobe Analytics API, you need to have a console.adobe.io account and set up the connection. So this will give you some elements such as the secret, the API key, actually we can go, it gives you the config file and it gives you some information and the private key that you can use for the generation of the token. I will do that. So on the first tutorial, we created this tutorial on Python to go through very briefly how the loop and the different element of Python is capable of doing. So the different dimension, the different variables, and different um, functions that are available in Python. And now we will create a Jupyter notebook directly. And for that, I will go here, press Shift and right click and open the PowerShell. And in my PowerShell here, I would say Jupyter notebook. And this will normally open me here a notebook, the home page. And then I can either choose to start this one, or actually I will create a new one. So I will create a new one in Python 3, and I will call it Adobe Analytics API demo. So I have some extra package. So you see here, we already start to change the name. I would always recommend that. I have some extra package on the button. So the NB extension that I've done, so I can have extra elements. You need to know that there is also the capability to do Jupyter Lab, which is a new version of Jupyter Notebook. I think it's more powerful. I do have my used on the Jupyter Notebook, so I'm using it, but at some point I will probably switch to a Jupyter Lab. Right now, I will use Jupyter Notebook for my tutorial, but it's not mandatory, and I think, encourage you to use Jupyter Lab if you really like it, or if you want to go to the latest version and what is going to be the future of this tool. So the very cool stuff that I do have at the moment is that I can have contents here available, and I can say, okay, I want to now do my setup here, and by doing that, I will use the markdown by clicking on. So you see that I've unselected my cell because it's blue. If I start writing on it, it's green. And you can actually let me zoom in a bit so you can see more. And as I'm on this cell but not inside, I can type M, and this will give me the markdown setup. And now I have setup here, and setup will appear here as well. So I can actually do my setup, and at any moment in time, if I want to go back to my setup, I can actually click here and it will scroll up for me, or if I click on something below, it will scroll down. And normally, the normal setup to be done at the beginning is to import your different modules, and I will import Analytics 2. And I don't want to type an Analytics 2 every time, so basically I'm always changing the name, and I will call it API 2 for the sake of it, because it's super fast to write and to type this. So now I have installed Analytics 2, I have imported it in Jupyter, and the first thing you want to do with this module is actually to create the configuration that we will need for this module to connect to the Adobe Analytics API. And in order to do that, actually, we will go here, and you see that I'm going to do API 2 create config file. And if I'm moving that a bit, you see that I have other stuff on background. And I'm doing that call now. Now I have a config admin that just pop up on my screen. So this, actually, you can open it, and I can bring that to you, and it will give you this element. So you will need to change here and put your org ID, which is something like this, with at adobe.com or something like this, and so on for all of the things. The API key name has been changed, and I think now it's called client ID, but you get the idea. And this, there is a path to the key for you. It will be, in your case, from this folder, it will be in the config, it will be the private key. So you do that, and then your setup, you change everything as you want. I mean, it doesn't matter that I'm doing that with you. I already have created the config analytics here. That is exactly my things. And now I can load that into the API and by import config file. And by starting, I know that it's starting by config, and I'm going to type the tab. I'm going to press the tab, and then it's automatically suggesting me some elements. So config admin is the one that has no element being changed, and the config analytics is the one I already prepared for this tutorial. So I will now import that. This has imported all of the elements that you need to do, or you need to have in order to generate a token, and the token will be used later on to make sure that you have the appropriate write or read access for your API. You can retrieve a token if you want by doing API2 retrieve token, and this will directly return you the token, and then you can reuse that token wherever you want for the different API call. That's actually, I think, one of the most useful element of my module. I know a lot of people have stolen it because it's not that easy to generate a token through JWT authentication for Adobe I/O console. But the good news for you is that it's already taken care of, and it's not even mandatory. So I won't actually generate a token, because if I'm using any of the method, and the first method that I need to use, we'll see that later, will actually call it, and if the token is not generated, it will automatically generate the token beforehand and take care of everything. So the second thing, after you import the config file into your module, the second thing that you want to do is actually retrieve the company's IDs. So company's IDs, I will do CID with S. So usually when I do CID with the S, I'm expecting a list, or I'm expecting something that go and has several elements in it. So an object or something like this. And for this, you need only to do the API2 get company ID. And this will retrieve you, let's go on and see what does that retrieve you. So you see that I didn't get the token, but it will automatically be generated now and being used for the request. The nice thing of Jupyter is actually you see the amount of not the amount, the order of the different call that I've been making. So now I'm doing the fourth call on Python. And you can see that I retrieved a list of different elements, and my global company ID is actually Adobe A61, and I will use for that this as a string, and this is I can say that I could actually try to access it, but don't overcomplicate things if it's not required. It's possible for some customer of Adobe Analytics to have multiple logging companies. So they have, let's say, big companies such as Unilever, for one that everyone knows, probably has a lot of different brands in a lot of different markets, and either each brand or either each market, or probably, or it's possible that both have their own Adobe Analytics logging company, and they are then separated, but you can actually have something on top, which is called the Experience Cloud, that aggregate everything, and then you can access all of those different companies from the API. So that's a very interesting part. So here I have only access to Adobe Analytics AGS 862, so this is my sandbox. And I will use that to generate my analytics instance. What is my analytics instance? So now we are actually starting to get to another element, is that because this capability is possible, so to have multiple company's ID, what I did is I create a class that make you the possibility to connect to several logging company at the same time. So you can actually do one thing and do another in another company at the same time. So copy paste segments definition, for example, that's possible, and so on. Um, so now I'm going to add a new row below. So by doing that, you see I'm on blue, so I'm unselected, but I'm not selecting inside, but I'm selecting this cell, and I'm clicking on B. And if I'm clicking on A, it's creating above, and B is below. This one, by clicking or by typing M, I will create now AGS instance up, and now I can directly navigate. So if I want, I can go back to my setup, or I can go to my AGS instance. Um, the other things, now I'm going to create this AGS instance, which is going to be API2 Analytics, and you see that it's require company ID as a string. So my company ID is this one, and the way I open that is to do Shift and Tab, and by doing that, I can actually access the different elements that are required or not, but the different elements that are defined in the signature. So this is the unique signature of my class. Usually in Python, class are with a capital letter at the beginning. So if you see a dimension or method that has a capital letter at the beginning, it's a hint that is most probably a class. It's not always the case, but in my modules it is. So I'm going to put the CID here, and this is it. Now AGS has all the capability of my class, so all of the different possibility from this module, which is possible, is going to be available in the AGS dimension. And what does that mean? It means that AGS dot is the way to access the different method of my module. And by typing the tab bar, you can see the different method that I do have. You can see I have a refresh token method, I have the update segment method, I have a create segment, I have deleted, I have get dimension. So usually on my different module that I create, it's very easy to find out what is what, because the get retrieve elements and the create element, the delete elements, and so on. The only kind of different one is the get report, which is basically you pushing elements through a through a post, but what you want to achieve is to get a report from it. So this is named get, but it's technically not a get. All the other are actually get methods. So everything now is being hosted here, and you can have a look at the header. I think I saw that. You can see that my header is being displayed now with my token and everything. So it's very nice. If you want to delete that, because I'm not going to use that at all, I can actually type DD, so D twice, to delete that cell. And now I'm back on the clean state again. So the first thing I want to see is what are my report suites. So I'm going to do RSID S, because there is a several report suite, and AGS get, most probably, so I'm using camel case, get report suite. And again, I can do the shift tab to get the different elements. And in that, sorry. And in that one, there is a doc string. There is a doc string where you can see that it's actually returning a data frame of report suite and a report suite ID. You can see if you can save. So if it's set to true, you can actually save the list in the file. And we won't do that directly, and we will see how to do that with Panda directly. There is other option and anything that can be done, but let's go for this now. So retrieving the report utility and have a look at it, and it's a data frame. So now we are going to manipulate a bit of the data frame to get you familiar a bit with Panda. So data frame is a Panda data structure. So it's the main Panda data structure that you can use. And they are very cool method that helps you manipulate those data. So it looks like an Excel sheet, you can see. And the first thing that you may want to do from a data table, you want to save it. So if you do RSID, so first I want to show you, so RSID, no, I will do that now, to CSV, if you want to save it to CSV, and you give it a name. I would say report suite.csv, and then there are several options. You can select, say it's separator. What is the separator? It's going to be for me this, but by default it is the comma. You can set a tab, which is also right, and I use that a lot because sometimes when you have numbers with comma, it's getting a bit messy, so I like to do tab. And you can select do you want to export the index, and the index is the column that has no name, and it's for us 1 2 3 4. So I don't want that, so I'm actually going to do that, and this is available for any data frame that you have. So I'm going to do that, and now I'm going to directly go, and you see that I have created one. And if I open it, it's obviously my different elements here, and you see that it's being separated by a tab. Excel is having a hard time reading it because it's Excel, and okay, that's fine. So right now it's quite easy because it's a very small data set, very minimum amount of rows. But imagine you have a lot and you want to actually access some of the rows or filter some of the rows. You can actually do that by calling this parenthesis or square bracket and say inside. So I want to have RSID. When RSID, so it is telling you when RSID name equal server log. So if I'm doing that, you see that it's automatically retrieving the server log one with everything. So you can also do change. So you see that now I am accessing the column name, and now I want to have RSID. Yeah, RSID. And I want that to be a string. And this is a very useful one. And I say I want that to contain data analyst. So those are my website, the staging and not the staging. And by doing that, actually I can retrieve both of them. So you retrieve both of them and you create that. The goal of this tutorial is just to show you what is possible to do. I'm not good enough to explain you really Pandas hardcore things because I'm not, yeah, as I say, I'm not good enough to do that. But that's already a very nice trick to manipulate data. A very good thing to look is also that you can see the different column that you have. So I'm doing column, and I see that I have name and RSID. So those are the two columns that I do have. And what else can you do? I'm thinking you can access also by doing lock, which actually I'm not using a lot, but the lock accepts a group of row and column by label or Boolean. So here it's giving you some example, and you can see that you can actually look at all of this, true, true, false, and so on. and this giving you the element that you can access. So let's try to do that, and you can access most probably something like the row here, and I can say I want my row 0 and my RSID, and here it's giving you these elements. So this you can access through lock, you can access a specific element on this data frame. So you need to know the index and you need to know the column, but to know the index, you can always retrieve this, I think, from doing index here. And you see that here I'm retrieving the index 0, 1. So imagine I'm doing this here. I guess, so let's see, it should work the way that actually, yeah, it's giving me those two elements here. So if I don't want to have if I want to have only one element, remember what I was doing before that. I was looking for, when I know that the report suite ID, yeah, in my case is this one. When I know a specific condition and I know that there is going to be only one thing returned, then I can directly retrieve this. So those are the different elements that, and we will use that a bit more in the future. There are other methods, and we will see that now, what we can do from it. We will know, we know that the different report suite we can retrieve. So here we know the report suite name, so I'm going to use my RSID without the S as a string as this one. And now I want to get the dimension. And again, so I will not do the metrics and everything, but I will do get. I can get the range, but I want to get the dimension. Again, I can look at the different things that I can retrieve, or the different element. There is a docstring for it. If you are not using Jupyter and or those does not being pop up for some reason, you can always do help on this in order to get the help on the get dimension. And here, everything that we're showing you is going to be displayed here. So this is a very useful help function. And now I will look at my dimension. And for that, you see that RSID is required. So actually, let's pass with RSID to actually get the dimension. And that is most likely going to return me a data frame. And now it starts to get a long list. So it cannot be showcased now. You see that we have none, have some parents, some are not. So when you start to get a lot of elements in your data frame, you may want to use only a portion of it. So you can do add to retrieve the top 5. You can do tell to get the last 5 elements, but you can also do head or tail with a specific number of elements. So let's say I want to have the 10 first elements. So now I have the 10 first element. Very interesting is that you see that here I do have a classification, and classification dimension are actually behind the scene attributed with numbers. So that means that explains why, I mean, if you actually had that problem at some point when you're moving from one report suite to another, you're using the same name in the classification, but there is a problem. It's because even if you have the same name, here campaign type in my report suite X and campaign type in my report suite Y, if they were not created at the same time or within the same order, they will not match internally, and that will create a problem. And you can see that now it's a bit not what I would like to have, because I need to scroll to actually see all of the different column. I don't see all of the column. what I could do, obviously, is to do dimensions column to get all of the column, but I want to also see what type of data is that. And then when I do have this problem, I like to showcase two elements and transpose the data frame. So the column becomes the row and the row becomes the column. So we can take two or three or one elements. Let's do three for the sake of it. And you look like this, and now it looks much cleaner. So you see that the elements can be quite big. So actually 3 is already reaching the limit. If I would put 4, it will probably be already, I need to scroll again. So I'm usually using 1 or 2, and I just want to see the different element. What you could do then is to say, okay, I want to see the different element type that are being retrieved and being assigned in Pandas. So at some point you may want to look at that. And for that, you can actually see my data frame. And by doing daytype, I can see that all of the elements are an object except pathable, that is Boolean. So that can be useful to know if you can actually sum elements or not, or you can look for a specific string or not. So now I'm having this element, and it's a lot, so I can actually have a look on how much there is. And there is 245, so the length of the dimension is the length of the data frame. I could actually look at a specific ID, and it will give me the same number because it's actually there is 245 in all of those columns. And sometimes you see that there is none, and we will need to look at that later. First, I would like to know the different type that there is. So it's not that, so you see that this order, enum, string, and so on. What you could do is actually say, I want to have the type. Oh, sorry, I click and enter. I should look at my keyboard. And you can actually have a look at the unique. And I'm not sure if it's a method or not. So let's try, and now let's try like this. Okay, perfect. So there is a method that giving you an array, and there you see that there is order, enum, string, int, enum, time, and decimals. So you could retrieve that and say, okay, types. Let's say dimension type, because you could have type is quite broad. So dimension types, and you can have that. And this is an array, so it's not a problem to have an array. So an array should have always the same type, but I prefer to use list because I don't know, it's nicer like this. You could use a tuple because you probably want to change this and say, okay, I want to have a tuple, and now my dimension type is a tuple. So the good thing of tuple comparison to list is that a tuple is fixed. I mean, it's not always a good thing, but the number of elements are fixed. So now the length is of this is 6, and it will always remain so. So this is an element, a differentiation between the list and the tuple. And the other thing is that if you want to iterate, or if you want to look at all of those elements, it's faster to go through a tuple than to do it from a list, because lists are referencing to elements in another memory, and where tuple try to get the elements in the one memory slot. So it's faster to access all of them. So I get the different dimension type. Problem is that I want to have all of the, well, it's not a problem, but I want to have all of the time those different elements are used, because maybe string is used 1 time and the other enum is 10 times. So actually I would need to understand what that is. And time is used 200 times, something like this. You could do that by doing a for loop or anything, but we're using Pandas, so let's use some Pandas Data Frame capabilities. And in order to do that, we can do dimension, actually a dimension type, and a very cool method is value counts. So you need to remember that value counts with the S, which is for me at least not very easy to remember, but this will give you the number of times each of those elements has been used. And you can see that string is used most of the time, enum is 45 times, and so forth and so forth. It's probably going to sum up to 245 at the end. So this is very interesting elements. Now I want to have only the dimension string, and for that let's do dimension and type equals string. So now actually let's look at the length of this, and it's 152. So it's exactly what I want. And now I can have a look at the head, and you see all of my different variables that are being used. You still see that I do have some none, and there is a cool way to actually look at how many none there is in your elements. And for doing that, we'll go to dimension again, and you do is NA, and this will give you true or false for all of the different elements. And I want to sum that. And I think that will work the way I want. And you can see, yes, that for the different column, it will give me the number of times there is not a number, so like an undefined dimension type in the variable type in the row and column. So here for category there is 74, for parents 221, because parents is happening only for classification, and description 242 because I probably didn't describe anything. So this already gives you a lot of information that you can easily access. Otherwise, you would need to go to the report suite and check all of the different dimension data. You want to have an extract of all of the dimension data being used. You can use this API to do that. So that was for the dimension. So actually, let's go up and use a markdown again, so M, and do a second level and say this was my dimension. So I can actually directly access that. Now what I will really do is, or I will do, not really do, is to have the segment, because I feel segment is a lot harder to keep track, because normally the dimension or events or metric are the type of thing that you check centrally or you actually create centrally. So it's easier to find what those elements are, or it's easier to keep track of that. For segment, it's quite not the case, because segment can be used by anyone or can be created by anyone. And you can have duplicate segment. It's very hard to keep track of who is doing a segment, what kind of segment is existing. I think so. I want to actually do that now. And I will, for doing that, I think you start to get the idea is that I'm going to get my login company and get segment, and let's do, I can retrieve one segment, and with S, I can retrieve all the segments. So now let's do that, retrieve the segments, and let's get what is existing. And you see that I have two segments, Python and analytics. So those are the two segments. There is an owner ID and there is RSID, so which report suite ID has been assigned to all of those segments. there is a description. Do we want to have a description or not? So looking at that, now already we can use this very fast way of retrieving segment to ensure that your segment naming convention, because I guess you have a segment naming convention, or if you don't, you should have one for large company that are normal companies that are using Adobe Analytics are quite large. You should have a naming convention. So already you retrieve that very easily and you check if the name are following the naming convention or not. And by the owner ID, you can directly see which owner, which person are not following the naming convention, and do appropriate training for them if they want to. You can get the user by doing AGS in my case, but it would be anything for you. Get user here, and that will give you the ID and the name of that person and that email. So that's also a very good way to check who's actually accessing your analytics, Adobe Analytics report suite or instance. So now it's very useful, but I want to have more. I want to have more information about that segments and so on. I want to check if those segments are duplicates or not. I guess not. You have the ID. It's really useful, but it's not giving you all the information that we want. So in order to actually do that, I'm going to create a new segment, and just first I want to check if I can copy exactly. That's what I want to do. This Python one, I could have choose anything, but I have copied that, and now I have a Python copy one. So now imagine someone comes to your company, and now this segment is looking for anyone checking for a specific path where Python is contained in that path. So I have my Python, so now it's my Python 2. Oops, sorry, 2, and I will save that. And in order to check the definition and all of the more in-depth details of those segments, what I need to do is to add an extra parameters in my code. And again, I'm going to do segments now, AGS, get segments, like this. And I'm going to check that. And you see that I can have different elements that you have information, but here you have extended information. And this gives you additional metadata field to include on response. So if set to true, it returns the report suite name, the owner full name, the modified, the tags, the compatibility, and the definition. And that's the definition that we are interested here. So I'm going to do extended info equals true. And now in my data frame that is being returned, I should see 3 elements because I've created a copy. Exactly, you see Python 2, and you see when it has been modified. So actually it's been modified 2 days after, and all my name is on them, and the seed title and the report suite name that is being associated. The definition is here, and the definition is quite interesting because now we can use Panda data frame method to check for duplicates on data frame. And this is going to be very easy because it's your name of your data frame and you duplicate it. And by that, you can actually say, okay, what do you want to check for a specific duplicated? So I will check for my definition column, and the keep will give you what kind of elements you want to keep, basically. So first, last, or false. First gives you mark duplicate everything except the first occurrence. The last is everything except the last occurrence, and the false mark all duplicate as true. So in my case, if I'm doing that, I'm expecting Python 2 to actually be the duplicate. But the problem is that if I'm doing that right now, there will be an issue. So let's try to do that. So I'm doing that, and now I'm saying, okay, type error. There is a gibberish, and most likely it's going to be unishable type dictionary. So this is the type here that you see is dictionary. And the dictionary is not something that you can hash. And what the duplicated function is doing is going to hash your column values and compare them to each other because it's faster that way. And this is not possible because we have a dictionary. So we will need to fix that problem first. And to fix that problem, you will need to create a new column, which is going to be definition string. And that will be my segments. You can see that I can also do type here, and it's going to be definition. And you can change just the element as a string by typing dot as type string. So this is going to be my definition as a string. So I actually stringify my dictionary. And now I'm going to tell him that I want the column def string to be used. And let's look what it's giving me. And now you can see that the array, the index 0 is false because it's unique. The 1 is false as well because it's unique, and true is for the Python 2 because the definition is exactly the same than the one before. It may not have been obvious, but if I look at the segment now, there is a new column here, which is def string, which is the same, exactly the same than the definition, but now it's being as a string, so I can actually hash it. So that's very useful. What we can try to do is also to change to put a description on the different elements. So in order to do that, what we can do is we will need to update the segment. And for doing that, we will need to retrieve the different elements that are being used. And let's look, actually, I don't remember that update segment, what is really required. So this, you see that the segment ID and the segment JSON. So let's look at what this is required. This represent JSON statement for the segment. So so it's actually not to be deleted. So this doc string is probably needs to be updated. And then I need to send the segment JSON. I will, for retrieving the JSON elements, I will actually retrieve the segment again, but now in a different manner. So I'm creating a new one, and now it's going to be row segments. And this row segment is going to be AGS, get segment. Actually, we can get segment like this. And we need the segment ID. And in that case, we do have, let's take Python 2 now. And we need to have the segment ID, which is here. So, and this is going to be a row segment. So now row segment is something like this. And what I want to do is updating the description. So row segment, this is a dictionary. So I can actually go to description directly and say this time, this is my duplicate of Python segment. So if I'm rerunning this cell again, now you see that my element has been changed. So now I can update the segment, and as I saw, I need to actually get the segment ID again and the segment JSON. So I get the row segment here. So let's try to do that and see if this works. I don't have, so insufficient access. So I don't have this access, the access to change the segments through my API. So I would need to log to the console, Adobe console, to actually change and make sure that I can actually change what has been done by my API. So this is not working at the moment, but I will guarantee you that normally if you have the appropriate access to your development environment, then you can access that. So I hope that was still useful, even if I actually didn't get to update the segment because of my insufficient access. And you enjoyed this video. The next video is going to be about running a report on Adobe Analytics. So I will actually create now a new tab. And on the next one, I will start by actually updating the segment uh, because I guess you deserve that. So report, let's call it get report. And this will be the next video because I will need to explain how the reports are working and everything again. It's already been explained on my previous video, but I just want you to make sure that you really get it because it's very important, especially if you want to run breakdown reports. So on this, have a great fun coding and talk to you soon. Bye.